Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening. I just want to thank everybody again for rocking with your boy on the Conversation 9-8. It's truly is a blessing. And I just want to thank you all so much for just being with me. I know the day is a little bit different. We have a slight time change today, but we wanted to go ahead on and get this in and make sure that we talk with the people, share with the people, do what we got to do to be able to converse tonight, because tonight conversation is not going to be a long one, but I feel like it's going to be a good one because I think it's going to touch a lot of the topics and things that we all go through, and I think not only that though, it's going to hit on some things that I think that we need to talk about that a lot of people have dealt with and suffer in silence on. So I'm truly excited about it, and I just want to thank you guys so much for your continued support. Make sure you share this, like this, let me know that you're in the building. And we're just going to go ahead on and get started. But again, thank you guys so much for rocking with me on the Conversation 9-8. We are at episode 125. So we're at 125 episodes going strong. And I'm just very appreciative of just the opportunity. Again, I'm on all social media platforms. You see, I'm on YouTube at the Conversation 9-8, on Instagram, the Conversation 9-8, on Twitter at 9-8 Conversation, on the Facebook, the Conversation 9-8, and also on TikTok at the Conversation 9-8 at the Conversation _98. So thank you again so much. Make sure you like and share this. Let me know where you're tuning in from. This is an interactive show and platform, and again, I'm just excited about the opportunity to be before you today. So we're gonna go ahead on and get started with this thing today. I mean, been dealing with this nice and warm weather up here, and it warmed up. Let me see what it is right now. So it's up to 4 degrees. Yeah, it's 5 degrees right now. 5 degrees up from a negative 22. So we got a heat wave coming in up here up in northern New York. But again, man, just excited for just the opportunity of coming on and talking. Let's talk, man. Let's get this thing going. My mom tuning in from Fort Drum. Free Mama D. That's an inside joke. But I love my mom. Thank her for her continued support. But we're going to go ahead on and get started when we're going to talk about addressing and overcoming the loneliness that comes from being lost in living our lives. And I want to say that again. We're going to talk about the topic of addressing and overcoming the loneliness that comes from being lost and living our lives. And the reason why I wanted to discuss that and talk about that, right, is because in life we can get to a space to where we're just living. Like we can get to a space where we get lost in our day-to-day routine. We get lost to going to work. We get lost to paying bills. We get lost with raising our family. We get lost with being in relationships, and we get lost in that just by being on autopilot and operating. Many of us find ourselves dealing with loneliness in that space because we don't even realize, and then it sneaks up on us, but we don't even realize that thing. I've given so much to this that I'm lost myself, and I don't even know who I am right now, and I'm dealing with the weight of the loneliness that comes from that. And you know, one of the things with that is, so when we have to deal with that, right? That's a weight that is hard for many of us to describe, right? And it's hard for us to describe because the weight that comes from loneliness, especially loneliness that we find within ourselves when we're just living our lives and really just going on autopilot and existing, that weight is a very heavy weight because the reason why it weighs so much, that loneliness weighs so much, is the fact that we are typically not alone with people. We're surrounded by people. We're living with people. We're in relationships with people. But we still feel that weight of loneliness because we lose ourselves, and other people that we are pouring into aren't there for us or aren't pouring back to us or reciprocating those things that we are giving to them. And we find ourselves at a space to where we feel overwhelmed, we feel used, and we feel lonely because we don't feel like we have the same support or getting the things that we need from the people that we're pouring into. And that can be a very, very hurtful and dangerous place. Why is that? So when you talk about that, Shep, okay, why would you, when you say that, what do you mean by that can be dangerous, right? What do you mean by that? It can be very dangerous with being in that place of loneliness, because especially when it comes from being lost and living our lives. And what I mean by lost and living our lives, and many of us can relate to this, many of us can identify with this, that we get up and we're going to work, we're in that routine, we in our routine, we're existing, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We have prioritized those things have become habitual of what we're supposed to do. And I'm not dismissing it, I'm not telling you shouldn't do that, but we can get to a space to where we lose ourselves and we lose our identity, because that becomes our priority, instead of really taking that time back to realize, why am I here in the first place? Why? What's the why behind my job? What's the why behind my relationship? What's the why behind my marriage? What's the why behind my relationship with my kids? What is that why? And when we lose sight of that why, that's when we become very lonely, and it can be a very dangerous place. It can be a very, very dangerous place. Why? Because we don't even think about it. And just think about this, right? Think about all of the times, and think about how many times. All right. Just think about this. Think about how many times that we find ourselves living or operating on autopilot. That we're getting up in the morning, we're getting the kids ready, we're cooking, we're cleaning, we're going shopping, we're pursuing those things, and we've dedicated so much of our lives to be in position to live the life that we live right now, and we just exist. That we're just existing to do those same things over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day. But what we don't realize is it's more to life than that. And we can get lonely even with fulfilling those roles that we have championed or we have pursued our entire lives. We can become lonely with filling the roles of a spouse, a husband, of a wife. We can become lonely with filling the role of our profession. We can become lonely in that if we don't connect with our why. And if we stay disconnected from that why and not take time to recognize and stay with that why, we can lose ourselves in that. We can definitely lose ourselves in that. And that's not a good space to be in. It's not a good space to be in that place, right? So that's what I'm talking about tonight, saying addressing and overcoming the loneliness, right? So when you say, okay, Shep, how can you address and overcome that loneliness, right? That comes from you just being lost and living your life. One of the best ways of doing it is you have to be deliberate about everything that you do. You have to take inventory about, okay, wait a minute, what is really important? That's one of the key things, because a lot of times what we lose ourselves because we begin to prioritize those things that's not really should be. We have our priorities in the wrong place. And those things and those people, places, and things that we prioritize shouldn't be in those positions. And that what that does is it erodes those relationships with the other people that we should be prioritized. And it erodes there, and nobody says anything, and we stay in that place. And by staying in that place, we stay in that place, but then we don't realize the damages that we're doing, because we're neglecting so many other people because we put things in the wrong priority. And we can change that ourselves. We can change that. We can change the priority of how we prioritize our kids. We can control that. We can change the priority of how we prioritize our spouse. We can control that. We can change that. So many of us, we put so much into our job. We put so much into external things that we don't prioritize those necessary relationships. And then what that does is it leads to loneliness in people's lives. It does. Because it leads to loneliness in your life if you're the one that's not having in the right priority, because you're neglecting, and by you're neglecting, you're ostracizing yourself and you're isolating yourself in a place to where even though you're providing, even though you're taking care of other people, even though you're there for them, even though you're present for them, that doesn't mean that you're there for them emotionally. That doesn't mean you're there for them supportively. That doesn't mean that you're there for them in the way that they need you to be, which leads to many of them being lonely. Being lonely. And I tell people this, man, loneliness is a very dangerous place. And the reason why loneliness is a very dangerous place is because most of the time loneliness is a result of something not being fulfilled, or a relationship not being fulfilled, or a relationship not doing what it says or not fulfilling the role in which it should fulfill. And I'm not just saying about loneliness, you being lonely, but no, what I'm talking about is that loneliness that comes from the neglect of somebody neglecting you in a relationship. And many of us deal with that. Many of us carry that. Many of us have to walk with that and try to overcome that, because the very thing that we expect from others, we find out they are not there to give that to us. Some of it is people don't know, some of it is intentional, and some of it is people don't realize that they have their priorities in the wrong space. That's what that is. Ms. Geraldine, how you doing? Thank you. She said, how you doing? She said, hey, how you tuning in from Sawyerville? My mom said, we forget to prioritize and allow others to dictate our lives, and we lose ourselves. When we lose ourselves, we become lonely because we have neglected ourselves. And that is so true. That right there is very true. And I appreciate your comment for that, Mom. And the reason why is that is a very, very true statement. And when she said we forget to prioritize ourselves to dictate and allow others to dictate our lives, and we lose ourselves. Yes, that happens so often, and it's a sad thing. And I see that happen so often with people on their jobs. They allow their jobs and the demands on their jobs to dictate so much of their life. And yes, your job may provide you the means of getting paid to take care of your family, but your job should not become the driving force of your life. And one thing that I've done is I've noticed so many people, especially in the military, that they have allowed the jobs and the demand of the jobs to dictate the trajectory of their lives and the prioritizations of their lives. And it gets to a space to where people don't realize that they lose themselves in it because they're operating in a role, but you still lose yourself. And that's a dangerous space to be in, a very dangerous space to be in. My mom said, your song, Miss You. Yeah, I had a song on my last album that I released last year titled Miss You. And in that song, it's a letter, literally, it's a letter to myself. And I start off by saying, excuse me, if you have some time. I have some things that I want to discuss that's been on my mind. And I'm just talking to myself. And the reason why is because I realized that I had lost myself. I realized that I lost myself by being prioritizing, fulfilling so many roles and so much responsibility that I took pride in to do, but I had lost a sense of who I was and found myself being lonely because I had lost myself because I was neglecting myself. I had neglected myself. And that's a dangerous thing to be in. Don't lose yourself by neglecting yourself. Because what happens is this, we lose ourselves by neglecting ourselves in the sense of we fulfilling the role to do for others. But the reality is we got to be careful because you cannot pour out a cup that's empty. You can't pour out a cup that got holes in it. What you'll be doing is wasted. So that's why you have to take time to prioritize yourself enough so that you will be in a position to pour into others. So don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect yourself. And I know what some people will say. I know what some people will argue that you know it can be hard not neglecting yourself. It can be hard not neglecting yourself when you are always used to taking care of other people. And when you're always used to taking care of other people, that becomes, you begin to identify by that. And what is wrong with that is, the scary thing with that is when you identify by something that is connected to what you do for others, that is a very slippery slope to where you will find yourself operating in a place of loneliness because you lose yourself in trying to fulfill those roles. You lose your sense of self if you identify or you put your identity in doing things for others, because it will be conditional. Your identity will be conditioned. The validation of your identity will be conditioned on how others will react to it. And some people some people, they will never react in a way that you may need, that validation that you may need. So don't put your identity into what you do for others. Don't do that. What you do for others can be part of those things that you choose to do, but you shouldn't try to get your sense of self or your identity from them or identify from them. My mom said neglecting ourselves can lead to the misuse of drugs and alcohol or promiscuity. Yes, it can, because it leaves us in a place of loneliness. And when we're in a place of loneliness, that's where we are the most vulnerable. We're the most vulnerable in a place of loneliness, because that loneliness is a void that we don't like to have, and it's a void that we carry around. So with that void, what we try to do is we try to fill that void with any and everything, right? And that's we try to do it through our jobs. We get accolades, we get praises, we get all of these things on our jobs. So we try to fulfill it through that. We try to fulfill it through those accolades on our job. We fulfill it through the accolades of being praised out of the community. We try to fulfill it through drugs, alcohol, whatever thing that we try to fill it with, and it would never fill that void, because that void coming from a place to where we have neglected ourselves and we haven't taken the time to get to know or deal with the reality of us, so that we can get back to prioritizing ourselves and pouring into ourselves, right? I'm not suggesting that you be selfish. That's not what I'm projecting, right? But being selfless is a reality that we prioritize ourselves in order so that we can be there for other people. And it's a space to where we have to get to that point to where we realize I had to learn, man. I had to learn that by me choosing to be there for other people, if I don't take time for myself, then I will really be no good in what I do for other people. And this is the thing: when you take time for yourself and you learn to do for yourself and be there and be prioritize self, right, and pour into yourself, what you would do is you'll be less impacted by the actions or the inactions of others and with the things in which you choose to do for them. You'll be less impacted because it's not conditioned on their reaction or them being appreciative. It's conditioned on the fact that you have the strength and you made a decision that what you're doing for them is what you're choosing to do, not what they're based off of their response. And I would say that, man, like, we have to overcome that. Like, so we excuse me. Many of us lose ourselves in living simply because we try to hide ourselves, or we try to run from the reality of our situations. And we lose ourselves in living because we try to pour so much into those other things. We try to pour into our kids. We try to pour into that job. We try to pour into all these other things instead of dealing with the reality of the stresses of a relationship, to deal with the reality of the stresses of the issues with your spouse, or dealing with the reality of trying to avoid the reality of the things you need to face forward, so that you can overcome and you can be made whole and you can become healed and operate in the fullness of your potential. But we pour so much into these other things that we lose ourselves in those things, and then turn around and get angry and get upset and get frustrated when those very things that we prioritize don't give back to us and leave us high and dry. And we wonder why. We spend so much time giving to our job, and then our job hires somebody else for a position that we pour so much into. But the reason why we pour so much into that job was because we was running away from dealing with the issues with our spouse. And the reason why we were running away from dealing with the issues with our spouse was because of the simple fact that I'm running from issues from my childhood that led to the issues that I had with my spouse. Y'all kind of see how this things go? And it's deeper than that. And we can control it. We can control all the things that we deal with. We can control it. But we have to make that decision that we're going to address it, that we're going to deal with it, and we're going to take the time and take the necessary steps to overcome it. Because we can do it. We can definitely do it. It is more than, and like I said, addressing and overcoming. In order to overcome the loneliness, in order to overcome it, right? You have to be able to admit that there is loneliness. You have to be able to admit that there is loneliness in your life. You just have to. You can't just sit around and try to act like you're good. No, you're not good. if you have that desire to go and get something to fill that void, if you have that desire to pick that phone up or send that DM or send that text message just to hook up with somebody, and then you hook up with them and you still have that void on the inside, no, that is never going to go away. That is not the answer to it. Yes, it can seem good, it can seem fulfilling in that moment, but it won't address the long-term issue that you have. And that long-term issue that you have is you may be expecting somebody to be there with you. You may be expecting that other person to fulfill that void, but they will never deal with the fact that you're neglecting or you're running from your real issue, the source of your real issue. And only you can deal with it. Only you can control that. So let's not put that on other people. Let's not try to act like or expect that other people to do those things for us. We control that. We have the power to control those things in our lives. So don't let that don't be overcome by that. I just wanted to come on real quick, and I told you I wasn't going to be long to discuss these things tonight, because I feel like it's very important to discuss these and talk about these type of topics, because you really don't see a lot of people talking about it. Yeah, I know we can talk about the us versus them. We can talk about what a man's supposed to do, what's a woman's supposed to do, and they get a lot of clicks and a lot of likes and a lot of shares and all these things. But when you start talking about stuff like dealing with loneliness, dealing with things that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, dealing with things that people deal with when nobody else is with them and they're in the house alone and they're on their phone trying to figure things out. You know, these are the type of things that I felt led to discuss, and I feel led to have these conversations about, because I feel like it is going to be helpful for somebody. And that's why I choose to continue to carry the mantle in which I feel God had led me to do and have this discussion. So I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate your continued support. I appreciate you guys more than what you know, because it means a lot. We're going to continue to keep going until I can't go anymore. So make sure you go and you like and subscribe like and subscribe on my channels, on my YouTube channels, just appreciate the continued support that everybody have. And I do want to announce that want to let everybody know, you can go right now. You see that, right? You see I Am Great. You see that is out right now on all digital streaming platforms. iTunes is on YouTube. Just put in Proverbs I Am Great. That's my new single that's out right now. So go ahead and check that out. Let me know what you think. Truly appreciate it. The support that's been going so far. So I want to thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys. You guys have a great and wonderful evening. God bless.